Well, Julian Assange has returned to Australia, as we know, and into the arms of his family, as we saw, after reaching a plea deal with the United States. Kenny Heatley takes a look back now at the life and controversies surrounding the WikiLeaks founder.
Growing up in the suburbs of Melbourne in his early teens, Julian Assange discovered a flair for computers and wrote his first program on a primitive Commodore 64. He was hooked and eventually obtained a modem, which allowed him to gain access to early computer networks. Under his hacker alias Mendax, the Latin word for liar, Assange was credited with multiple attacks on international online networks, including NASA, the Pentagon and the US Navy. Later labelled one of Australia's most notorious hackers of the 1990s, a 23-year-old Julian Assange first landed in the headlines in 1994 when he was charged by the AFP for 31 crimes related to hacking, but he never went to jail. Facing a lengthy prison sentence, he struck a plea deal and was released on a good behaviour bond. In 2006, Assange and a group of activists established WikiLeaks. The .org is still in operation today. Assange and WikiLeaks first gained international notoriety in 2010 when the website published classified US military documents on the Afghanistan and Iraq wars and thousands of diplomatic cables. It was and still is the largest security breach in American US military history. The almost 750,000 documents were given to WikiLeaks by then US Army intelligence analyst Chelsea Manning, who gained access to classified databases in 2009. Manning was sentenced to 35 years, but in 2017, then President Barack Obama commuted her sentence and she was released after 7 years.
She had served a significant amount of time, that it made sense to commute and not pardon her sentence.
The most damaging material included a 39-minute video titled Collateral Murder of a July 2007 Baghdad airstrike that showed a US Apache helicopter firing at suspected insurgents in Iraq, killing dozens of civilians, including 2 Reuters news staff. The video made Julian Assange and WikiLeaks a household name.
I regard him as a traitor in the sense that during a time of war, when we had American, British and Australian troops in the field under fire, Julian Assange published troves of unredacted documents. So that puts the soldiers at risk, that puts our methods and our methodology at risk, and it also puts the locals who are putting their lives on the line at risk.
Julian Assange and WikiLeaks transformed how information and whistleblowers could reach the public without the mainstream media. To many, Julian Assange was seen as a hero for exposing wrongdoing and alleged war crimes.
Information that organisations are spending economic effort into concealing, that's a really good signal that when the information gets out, there's a hope of it doing some good.
In the wake of the leaks, US lawmakers pushed for the prosecution of Assange and any journalist or government insiders who had collaborated with WikiLeaks.
There's no evidence that anything he did was illegal.
As his name entered the headlines, Assange was accused of rape by a woman and the sexual assault of another woman in Sweden in 2010, claims he has always denied. Fearing extradition to Sweden, Julian Assange sought political asylum in the Embassy of Ecuador in London.
In the morning, the sun came up on a different world and a courageous Latin American nation took a stand for justice.
During his time at the embassy, he became engaged to lawyer Stella Morris in 2017 and had 2 sons. In 2013, the Department of Justice did not indict Julian Assange because it couldn't find evidence that his actions differed from those of a journalist. But that changed under Donald Trump, whose administration stepped up its pursuit, and by May 2019, Assange was facing 18 federal charges in the US, including conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. In response to the charges, Assange's supporters described him as a journalist who did nothing more than publish leaked information that embarrassed the US government. In April 2019, Ecuador revoked his asylum and Assange was dragged out of the embassy by police and incarcerated in the high-security Belmarsh prison in southeast London without conviction. A pale Julian Assange had not seen daylight for 5 years. He was confined to his cell for 23 hours a day and only given 1 hour of recreation per day inside. His health deteriorated behind bars, suffering a mini-stroke. But then, after 14 years, a deal with the US was signed on June 19. Over fears of stepping foot on mainland US, Assange flew to the tiny northern Mariana Island in the western Pacific Ocean, part of the Commonwealth of the United States, to face court. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of violating the US Espionage Act and was sentenced to 62 weeks behind bars, roughly equivalent to the time he had already served in the UK, allowing him to walk free and into the arms of his family in Australia.
I finally got to embrace my husband as a free man.
Next week, Assange will celebrate his 53rd birthday a free man. And now back in Australia, his family says he'll focus on life's simple pleasures. But even after 14 years, Julian Assange's legal fight may not be over. His lawyer, Jennifer Robinson, hinting to Sky News he will be seeking a presidential pardon.
What we're interested in is not just a pardon for Julian, but in changing the law to make sure that no other journalist can be prosecuted in this way under the Espionage Act.
Kenny Heatley, Sky News.